Hello friends, it's Terry here from Cloudy Coral Designs. I am so excited to be here on the ScrapbookPal channel. For this video, I will be sharing a Thanksgiving themed card featuring Lawn Fawn Scripty Autumn Sentiment with the coordinating dies. The sentiment stamp is such a great one to have in your stash. I felt inspired to create a card for my family for this Thanksgiving. So let's get started. To start off, I stamped Tiny Friend stamp set from Lawn Fawn in Memento Tuxedo ink. This ink is perfect to use when using Copic markers because the ink doesn't smear. I am not doing anything fancy with my coloring here. I am keeping things pretty simple. All the colors that I used are listed on screen. I selected Copic colors that went well with a traditional Thanksgiving color palette. Most of the colors are desaturated to complement my ink blending that you will see in a bit. Since the images are so small, I didn't feel like I needed to color with many details. I used a combination of 2 colors for each article of clothing, for each skin tone, and for each of the character's hair. When I am using Copic markers, I like to use a nice smooth alcohol-friendly cardstock. I will list the products that I use down below in the description if you are interested. Then, for the card front, I use a rectangle die from Lawn Fawn and die cut that out from Lawn Fawn Speckle A cardstock. I then use Lawn Fawn Fall Leaf Stencil with Distress Oxide inks. I like using blending brushes in various sizes to fill in the stencils. I found that it helped with creating easier blends. The colors of the Distress Oxide inks that I use are Peeled Paint, Brush Corduroy, Fosilized Amber, Spice Marmalade, and Crackling Campfire. I wanted to create a color blend that resembles the fall season. Although the stencil was made for a different shaped card front, I found it quite easy to manipulate it to work on a slimline shaped card. What I did here was rotate the stencil, making sure that the areas underneath the stencil is clear before I ink blend that area. Making sure to use masking tape or post-it tape to cover areas of the stencil that might interfere with layering process. I also repeated the process with the second layering stencil. I love how this looks. Now, using mini picture frames from Lawn Fawn, I die cut that out of white cardstock 4 times. I also cut it once in craft colored cardstock and once out of acetate. I glued all of the white layers together and sandwiched the acetate layer between the craft colored frame. Sometimes the glue might not want to adhere to the acetate, so what I like to do is use a heavy acrylic block to place on top of the pieces to help apply some needed pressure. I like gluing multiple layers together because it creates dimension and interest on my card front. Also, using acetate will mimic the glass on a picture frame. So for the inside of the frames, I want to create a background scene for my characters. I used Copic markers in the shade G21, G24, and BG96 for the grass. I then used Copic markers in the shade B0000 and B00 to create the sky. I did this for all 3 frames background. Now for the sentiment. I am using this awesome Scripty autumn stamp and die set from Lawn Fawn. I love how natural and organic the font looks. I like to use my anti-static powder bag before heat embossing. This prevents unwanted embossing powder to stick in unwanted areas. I stamped the sentiment Grateful with a clear ink. I like using VersaMark ink because it's nice and sticky. The stickiness helps hold all of the embossing powder when it's time to heat set. I then used Nuvo embossing powder in jet black and heat set that with my heat gun. I really like this embossing powder because it's really nice and intense. Okay, before using the coordinating dies to cut out the sentiment, I like to die cut the sentiment from a scrap piece of paper. I then use a negative piece and place that over the stamped sentiment as a guide for die cutting. Once I find the perfect position, I pop the die back in place and tape it down. This will help with getting the perfect die cutting results. Now for the second sentiment. I used Celebration Scripty saying from Lawn Fawn that says Happy Thanksgiving and stamped that on the card front with Memento ink. I then used a larger rectangle slimline piece and die cut that out of craft colored cardstock. This will layer between my white card base and my card front. Okay, so now to assemble the pieces together. Here are the background and my picture frames. You can see how the acetate mimics the glass of a picture frame. I love adding extra touches to my cards because it creates so much added interest. So before adhering the frame to the background, I went ahead and glued down my tiny friends on the background scene. I wanted to create a card front that resembles my family in the picture frames. So the inspiration on this card is pictures of my own family. My parents, myself, and my husband, and my kids. I know it might sound silly, but it makes it that much more meaningful when I'm creating. So now that all the small pieces are adhered together with liquid adhesive, I then use foam tape behind my card front and place that on top of the layering rectangle. Although the picture frames give the card a good dimensional aspect, I still wanted a little more interest. I then glued down the completed picture frames down onto the card front, along with the hangers. I put foam tape behind the sentiment and adhered that on top of the middle frame. I also stamped out a phrase from the stamp set and cut that down to fit on top of the grateful sentiment. And to finish the card off, I glued it down to a white card base that measures 3.5 inches by 8.5 inches. I like having a little bit of white peeking behind the layers. And there you have it. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please subscribe to stay connected with updates and more inspirational tutorials. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.